Hello, everyone. This is Justin Warner from DecisionWise. Thank you for joining us with our webinar today, Debriefing 360s and Coaching. We're excited to have you with us. We're excited to have Deka, one of our senior consultants here at DecisionWise, who will be talking to us about debriefing 360s and coaching. So DecisionWise twice a year has a certification training that we do, and on March 26th and 27th we are hosting a certification training, and I know we'll be talking about that throughout the presentation, but we would love to invite anyone that would like to come to that. There's information on our website about that certification training, but again, that's March 26th and 27th at our office locations here in Utah.
Yeah, and this is Dan, and I'm excited to be here with everybody. And this is a good summary of some of the big ideas and concepts that we'll be covering in that. That certification is a much more in-depth, kind of 2-day experience into these concepts, but we've put together here a pretty good summary of the key principles and ideas and practices that help you get the most out of 360s and debriefs.
Great. Also with this is we want to have a little bit more interactivity with this webinar. We're going to ask for feedback. So if you'll see on your screen the notes to the questions from the audience, or to ask a question, please feel free to type in there any question that you have. And while everyone is on mute, we will try to get as many of those questions answered throughout the process. So Dan, with that, I'm going to turn the time over to you and let you kind of maybe introduce yourself, and then let's talk through what we want to cover on the debriefing and 360s.
That's great. Everyone, it's a pleasure to be here with you, and there probably aren't too many topics that I'm more excited to talk about than 360s and coaching. I love it. So just real quickly about me, got some business degrees and spent my life in human resources, a bunch of different companies, Micron, Capital One, Wells Fargo. And now working at DecisionWise, we work on engagement surveys, 360 surveys, and coaching. And what we've put together here is a summary of some of the concepts that we found to be most helpful, and we'll go through our purpose and desired outcomes here. So when we go, and the purpose of our webinar today actually is to explore some best practices and learnings about debriefing and coaching from 360s, just to help you and add to your toolkit. And we know that you probably already, if you're on this call, you're probably familiar with the idea of 360s, but we want to enlarge and amplify your toolkit to help you with that. So we'll go over an overview of some key 360 principles that we found to be super helpful to help people turn this investment into a resource that, with a high return. And then we'll also go over our coaching model, because we believe the process where you take a 360, which we'll talk about as a disruption, you debrief it and you coach people to help them turn that into an action plan and change. There are some ideas that we can share to help, and then some learnings and best practices. And then my goal is that you feel more confident and capable to debrief and coach from these 360s. So first we start with why do we use them? And one idea that we have is around the idea of a disruption. And I wish that when we were talking about change, that you and I could read books and look at other people and learn from everybody's experience. But I've found from my own experience and from life that sometimes you got to have a disruption to make that change happen. And even when I think about nature, like if we want to get stronger, we have to disrupt our muscles. We challenge them. We make them uncomfortable. We lift. We work out. We actually disrupt them, and they grow and get stronger. That same pattern is apparent in nature. For a forest to grow, there usually has to be some type of fire, to clear that out. For wetlands to grow, there's a flood that usually happens that enlivens it. For a bush to grow, we actually have to trim it, and that can be very disruptive to the bush. And it's kind of a strange idea of like, wait a minute, you mean I'm going to clip this thing back and it's going to help it grow? And I'm like, yeah. And so that's why we use 360s, is to create this disruption. It's a disruption to people's individual perception about how they see themselves showing up in the world. And if you've never done a 360 before and you do one and you see, wow, people are seeing things differently than the way I see them, it can be very disruptive to you. And it's a disruptive to the way you see yourself, and it's a disruption to increase our awareness of how we're thinking and how we're showing up. And we find that in using this 360, increasing awareness and perspective, you can create more choices and possibilities for action and results for people. So that's why we use them. Create a disruption, an opportunity to increase growth and capacity and capability in people. The next thought is around debriefing and coaching. And I just wanted to make a little bit of a distinction between debriefing and coaching. Debriefing is kind of how we refer to the actual debrief of the results. What we find is the best practice is we'll have someone do a 360. And to give you a little bit more details on it, we can administer the 360. We can create the 360. We administer it. We usually give it to people 24 to 48 hours before we have the debrief conversation. We want to give them enough time to be able to go through the data, but we don't want them stewing on it too long. So we send it to them 24 to 48 hours. Then we meet with them, and our general practice is to have an hour and a half conversation with them, this debrief, where we go through what's the purpose, desired outcomes of it. We go through a little bit of history, both on our side and on theirs, so we know a little bit more about each other. Then we help identify what they want to focus on. Then we help them debrief the actual report, and probably the most important thing is create an action plan for change. And so that's what we call the debrief session. Ideally, we like to do those in about an hour and a half, and then we actually like to have follow-up sessions after that, either a half an hour or an hour call, maybe a month or two after that to follow up on that action plan. But that's what I mean by debriefing and coaching. And we'll go through some more details of how you turn this disruption into a stepping stone and learning experience. And we believe you do that by providing the support around it. And then
Dan, really fast.
Sure.
So a lot of people do 360s. We see 360s done all of the time. Some of those 360s don't include a debrief or some coaching session with that. Would you give your thoughts about maybe why it's imperative that we have some sort of follow-up to that 360, that we should never do a 360 and just leave people to their own mind of what's going on? Talk about the importance of that debrief, at minimum that debrief on
Sure.
those 360s.
Yeah, because we have some clients, you're always considering costs and investment. And there's this idea of, hey, we want to do a 360 to increase awareness for someone, but are we going to spend that time and that money in doing the debrief? I feel very strongly about it because of this. It's a disruption, and boy, I like probably you and me. Things that I get disrupted by, I have a tendency to try to end that disruption as quick as possible. And a lot of times, if you just do a 360 and it's some challenging information, that thing can get filed away and you can kind of move from that. But if we do some type of debrief, and either from an external version, like from us, or an internal version where we have someone inside their own organization, like the HR person or a mentor to debrief it, it provides that support. It provides that that support around that disruption where they can actually turn it into something positive. But boy, left to their own devices, even if it's positive sometimes, you just don't go as deep as you could as if you're working with a coach, just like in anything else. Like if we're trying to work out and get in shape, we can do it by ourselves or we can do it with a trainer. That usually helps to have someone that support to turn that into some action.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. So then, and we also, actually, Justin, this is related. We don't believe that we just learn from the experience of having a debrief or a 360, but with the actual debrief of the experience. People you go and you see a movie, but probably sometimes the most fun part of it is the debrief of it. What did I learn about it? Or you have a meeting and you have that meeting, but then the debrief of it is where you're able to go a little bit deeper and get that learning from it. So that's where we believe that support is around that. And it's interesting, one more thought on this is we were meeting with some of our partners. We have partners in Mexico and Brazil and the Netherlands. We were introducing some of these 360 concepts, and they came back to us and said, wow, this is a big investment. This is a big investment that you do a 360 and then you have this debriefing and coaching. And we're like, yes, it is an investment. It's a worthwhile investment, and we'll talk a little bit more around the potential of the 360. But to have a change in a leader and in the way that someone sees things, how they feel about their leadership, and then they're able to demonstrate new behaviors, that's a big change. And so it does require this investment of the right questions, the right tool, the right timing, and then the support around it. So that's where we talk about debriefing and coaching. And this is a place where actually I'd ask for a little bit of interaction here. So you can either type in on the notes and Justin will be looking at that. So we'd love if you added some of this in of just, so I know a little bit more of where to focus of what's the most challenging part of a 360 for you. And then what's the most fun that you have in it. So if you wanted to add any of those, feel free to type in those while we're going along. And Justin will be able to pull those up and we'll chat about those. So now I'm going to go into some of our principles, and I've got 3 primary principles. I've talked a little bit about these, but I'm going to go a little bit more in depth. So we talked about a 360 being a disruption, and a disruption to what? And what it is a disruption into our perceptions, into our thinking of ourselves and how we show up. And we've talked about how what we want to do is we want to turn this disruption into a learning opportunity. And we do that by creating this safe place to explore it and to support the realization of this perspectives. And some of the things that we're combating in this disruption is when people get 360s, the most normal response is, hey, what's my lowest score? Let me go through that and try to increase that and make that higher. So that low score fixation is what happens very commonly. And then another thing that commonly happens is people downplay or ignore their strengths. And when we're supporting them doing that debrief, we want to highlight how they can leverage those strengths. And then there's also this often disconnected influence of overused strengths. If I'm working with experienced leaders, they've probably had maybe some 360s before, they've received a lot of feedback, and so they know what their opportunities are, but a lot of times people aren't aware of what their strengths are and how they might overuse them. And by that I mean, and you're probably familiar with this concept, but it's something to keep in mind when you're looking at a 360. Somebody may have great attention to detail, but then that shows up as an overused strength of micromanagement. Or they have a great sense of ownership, but they're not a team player because they're taking all of that. And so that's something that we want to keep in mind.
Yeah, Dan, let's talk a little bit about that, the strengths and the weaknesses, the negative, some of the stuff that's coming in. Some of the challenges have to do with negative comments, hurt feelings, right? That it's our tendency to go right to the negative. And how do you kind of play with that, the strengths and the negatives, and how do you help people with those negative thoughts and feelings that are coming through?
Those are great questions and great concerns that come up, like the stress or anxiety that comes up with the 360 of if I ask people some of these questions and I make myself vulnerable, what are they going to say about me? And there's always this concern that someone's going to say some negative things. I actually don't find that to be the norm. And I guess it goes from this place of, do you believe people are generally good and they want to help? And from my experience, I find that I do not find the 360s being used as a place to bash or, to pull people down. I think a lot of it has to do, and we'll talk a little bit about this around your 360 ecosystem. If you're going to do a 360, how do you prepare people to give feedback? How do you train them on saying, hey, this is how you give positive feedback. This isn't a place to, try to be overly critical on this. And then how have you prepared your support system around it? So I realize that fear comes up, that somebody may put some negative things in there, but from my practice, I haven't found that. I think that people are trying to help others improve.
Yeah.
So it's pretty balanced.
That's great.
Okay. So then the next thought, and this is a pretty powerful thought that we use, and it's just an interesting one for you, is, if the 360 is the question, then where is the answer? And that sounds a little bit profound, but when you're functioning as a consultant and if you're hiring me as a consultant, you're like, Dan, give me the answer. So the answer is in me. But when you're a coach, you're looking for the answer, and the answer isn't in the 360 report. The answer is in the person. And that's a very coaching mindset. But boy, that makes a big difference, because when we are debriefing 360s, and then from our practice, we get the 360, but then we are looking for the answer to some of those questions that come up within the employee, within the person. And that I'll talk about this in the next couple slides, it shifts the center. A lot of times people look at a 360 and they go, oh my gosh, there's 20 people and they're all going to tell me what I need to do differently. And that can be a little overwhelming. But if we say, actually, the answer is not in the report, but the answer is actually in you as the individual, and I'll explain how we get there, that's very powerful.
And does that help balance out some of that potential negativity that might be there and the perception of negativity, right? Because sometimes that negativity is just simply a perception, right? And because the 360 is perceptions, how somebody perceives you at these certain times, but having the answer be within the person rather than the report can help balance that out.
Yeah, definitely. And then it's not like your goal when you do a 360 is to create an action plan to address your low points. Your goal, and we'll talk about this, is to identify what do you want to accomplish in the next 6 to 12 months, and that's your primary goal. And then what does the 360 share that will help you achieve that? And that just shifts it, because when people get a 360, they go, gosh, I have to respond to all this data, and they're concerned about the negative part. And we're saying, actually, let's focus on what you want to achieve and make that the center. And I think that makes it a much more fulfilling experience. It also makes it a much more fulfilling experience for the debriefer or for the coach, is because, if you're debriefing these and you're thinking, I got to find the answer and tell them out of this report, I actually think you're creating some undue pressure on you, and it doesn't create as fulfilling experience as if you're like, I'm looking at this report, what are the themes I see, but then I want to coach this person and help them bring out what they want to achieve. Boy, that's a much more fulfilling experience as a debriefer too.
The people who are on the call, most of them are in human resources, right? So they're in this career because they want to help people. And that's the fun of doing these 360s, is seeing that person develop, seeing that person progress. So having a fulfillment, not just for the one receiving the debrief, but the people on this call, those who are debriefing, is just equally as important.
Yeah, and it because then when I'm preparing for it, what I'll do is I'll look at the report and go over and say, what are the themes, what are the highs, and what are the lows. But then I'm really looking to identify what are the questions that I have. Like, I see some things, I'm not sure what this means. I just write down those questions. Then when I get on the phone with the person, I'm excited to learn the answers to those questions, and then I'm excited to leverage this 360 to help them achieve what they want to achieve. Boy, that creates a much more fulfilling experience.
Yeah, that's great.
So the next page of principles actually refers a lot to this. And we actually talk around what's our role as a coach. So our role as a coach when you're debriefing is to create this safe environment where they can feel comfortable with you, sharing some of their vulnerabilities in this 360 and what they're working on. We talk about staying out of the box and then helping them define and verbalize their answer, their direction, and their actions. I'll talk for a second on staying out of the box. This is a pretty common coaching idea, but whenever you're coaching someone, what you're doing is you're interacting with them, and then they're usually talking about some subject. They're talking about something, and let's say that's the box, and we want to stay out of that box. So, for example, if I'm coaching somebody and they bring up a topic that I have maybe had some personal experience with or some challenges with, maybe it's around delegation, I could jump into the box with them and go, yeah, boy, delegation is really hard. Or I could say, gosh, I can see from these comments that people aren't supporting you in your abilities to delegate. Jumping in the box, when I jump in that box with them, it's hard for me to get back out and to stay objective. So instead of talking with them about that, I'm interacting directly with them. It's just kind of a subtlety, but boy, that helps a lot, because we tend to, when people share some thoughts, we tend to share our own experiences, and you can use that as a coach to help someone, but actually I find it more helpful to kind of stay out of my own personal experience and just in theirs.
So Dan, we've talked a little bit about coaching versus consulting, and you are both. You are a coach and you are a consultant. And there are times when you need to put on a consulting hat, and there's a time when you need to put on a coaching hat. And again, we've had a really good comment around that. Maybe talk about how you use those different hats and why it's important when you do the debrief that you have on your coaching hat versus a consulting hat that you might have when you're working with a large organization or something like that. Kind of paint that picture there.
Yeah, if I'm doing a debrief and I'm approaching it as a consultant where I have the answer, then that means I'm going to review these results, and then I'm going to tell them what I think they should do with it. That's a consulting approach. And of course, I want to share my expertise. I've done a lot of these. I've been doing them for decades. And so I want to share that. but my main orientation isn't that the answer is in me. It's the answer is in the participant. And so as a coach, and we actually use this model here, this is a great model to illustrate what that coaching mentality looks like. I'm listening, I'm observing, I'm validating, I'm empowering as a coach. And what that looks like is when I'm listening to what is said. I'm super curious. I'm trying to listen to understand, and it sounds like, tell me more about that, or what's happening. And then I'm observing. I'm not just observing what is said, but also kind of what is felt. And my mindset is not around judgment, but sharing what I observe. And I'll repeat that back to people. It's like, here's what I heard you say. Am I on the right track? So it sounds like this. And then an important part of coaching is validating, where I'm acknowledging what's felt. They may have some emotions around some of these comments, and I validate those. I can see why you might say that. It makes sense that you would feel this way. But then as a coach, the next thing that I'm focusing on is empowering them around what's possible. How do I forward the thinking? We explore options, and I talk about, so what's next? How could we improve that? And from a coach, I'm always trying to forward the action. I'm moving it forward. As a consultant, sometimes I'm more in the present. I may be looking in the background, like, how did you get here? How do we fix that? But as a coach, I'm listening, observing, validating, empowering, trying to forward this action, and what are they going to do about it next? And so it's a different mindset than as a consultant. It's more about the future and how we get them to the next place that they want to get to. Okay. So the third principle, and I've talked about this a little bit, is what do you put at the center of the 360 debrief conversation? And I've talked about this, but just getting really detailed on how we actually do it is that we reposition the center from everyone else's perspective to their own. And what I mean by that is when you get the 360, you have this idea that here's everyone else's perspective. Maybe it's 20 people's perspective, and I need to respond to that. And people are a little bit reactive to it. But what we ask them is, what do you want to accomplish in the next 6 to 12 months? What are the most important things? And we spend some time talking with them. Some people, that's a very easy question to answer. They've got their business goals that are really clear. They may have some developmental goals. They may have, hey, I've looked at my 360 and here's what I want to focus on. But to me, that's what you're doing, is you're recreating the center. And you're almost taking the 360 back from all these people that provided the feedback to their own tool. And that's one of the most positive and impactful things that we can do, is do that. And then everything we do from that point in the 360 is using those goals and saying, how can we use this 360 report and this feedback to help you accomplish those goals? And boy, that just shifts everything. I've just actually was on a debrief just prior to this. And just to show you kind of an example of that, we go through the introductory conversations, and we go through a little bit of history, and then I ask the person, hey, what do you want to accomplish? And when she says, I want to understand where that line is, where I push too hard or I don't push enough. I need to find where that is, and I want to control my reactions as a leader. Then we keep that mindset, we keep that goal at the forefront. And so then we're looking through the behaviors, the derailers, the comments, and seeing how it provides feedback on those goals. And so I think that's one of the most powerful things you can do. That's very different around the DecisionWise debriefing process, is just recreating that center.
Would you say, Dan, that the reason why we go about this is because we want the participants to own their output, right? This isn't an HR initiative. This isn't a succession planning initiative or whatever it is. This is for their development, and we want them to own that. And this process allows them to take ownership of that. Is that a fair?
Totally. Yeah. Like we all know, our own personal agency is probably the strongest motivator for us. And I'll talk in another point around, like, what's your 360 ecosystem look like, to make this process a positive one for the participant. And the number one thing is, how engaged am I as the participant. Do I want a 360? Like, I can kind of map out the differences of the 360s that come to us when somebody says, you know what, I'd really like to improve as a leader. I'd like to do a 360. All right, that's a great setup. Then we have one where we have a developmental manager or relationship where the manager or a friend, leader says, hey, by the way, you're doing a great job. I think there's some places you can improve. I think a 360 could help. Then we have the final place where someone's being told they have to do a 360. Now, yes, there's value in all of those, but the ones where we can choose it, the more we can choose, and it can be about us, it's so much more positive. And I can just see that shift because when we get on a call, I'll go through purpose, desired outcomes. I'll ask somebody, have you ever had a 360 before? If they haven't, then I go, hey, what normally happens is you get this, you look at your report, you try to increase your lowest scores, but we do something differently. We're going to have you define what you want to accomplish in the next 6 to 12 months. We're going to use the 360 to help you achieve that. How does that feel to you? And I can feel the shift in the call and the sense of ownership. That's just like, oh, this is mine. And you mean this whole process is to help me achieve what I want to achieve? And I go, yeah, it is. There's just a very different shift there.
That's great.
So that's where we make the center of the conversation. And then this gets to some ideas. And I mean, if you're doing this type of work, you might have seen this idea before. But how do we best help people change? And I feel that the way that we help them change is we increase their awareness so they have more choices. And a lot of times people will come to me and say, hey, Dan, I want to get better at some result. Like I need to delegate more, or I need to communicate more, or I need to be less volatile. And they're talking about results. But what I find is most helpful is if we move back from those results. If we focus on the thinking that drives the feelings, that drive the actions, that then drive their results. And you call this a cognitive behavioral theory, but we just believe that you can change behaviors faster by focusing on principles or thinking than on the behaviors themselves. And just as an example of how that shows up and is, maybe somebody gets some feedback, on their 360 that says, they're not a team player, or they're not including people, or they need to communicate more. I try to move back and see what thinking drives that. And what I find commonly is a lot of people have progressed from an individual contributor to a manager or leadership position, but they still have the same thinking and mindset as an individual contributor. And by that, an individual contributor, the primary kind of mode or thinking there is, my job is to get stuff done. And if you're a leader and you still have that idea, my job is to get stuff done, then you might get a little annoyed when you get questions or off track or people come in and have conversations with you. But if we change your thinking about what's my role now as a leader and we add just this little element, it's to get things done and to build the capability and the confidence of the people around you. Boy, that changes everything. So if we change your thinking, then you're going to have some different feelings. That's going to allow you some different actions and results. So that's something that we focus on in 360s. And when we do these debriefs is I'm always listening for people's thinking, for their mental models, and then connecting that to the feedback that they're getting. And I would much rather focus on their thinking than just on their results. So I listen for mental models. I listen for paradigms. That's one of the reasons, like when we do our debriefs, we actually start with a little history. We have them go through their history, say, hey, tell me, where were you born? Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? What was your first job? How'd you get into this current role? And then what's the most important thing you want to do in the next 6 to 12 months? And when I'm listening to those things, I'm able to identify some more of their thinking. Just as an example, if I'm coaching somebody and I know that they've been in the Marines and that's where they came from, I know that that's going to show up somehow in their 360s, whether it's in preparation or discipline. If I know that they were a swimmer in college and they didn't just swim for 1 year, but all 4 years, I can use that. I know a little bit more about them and it'll relate to their thinking. If I'm coaching someone and their parents passed away and they were raised by their grandparents, those are all things that you can use in a quick introduction. Usually when I do the history, have them go through their history, it doesn't take more than 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. But it just helps develop a little bit more of a bond, more of an understanding, and then it gives me a little bit more of a platform to coach from.
Yeah. Dan, how much preparation needs to be done prior to the 360 to help set that stage? For example, you listed those different types of, reasons why people get 360s. Development, maybe there's something going wrong and they need, a manager wants them to take the 360. There are different levels, and some people view the 360 as a punitive process, right? Mm-hmm. It's performance related. It's rather than development. How how can our folks on the call, how can they set the stage before the 360 is done so that this process that you're describing right now is a continuation rather than the starting point, but it's a continuation?
Yeah, that's a great point, and I refer to that as like the ecosystem, and thinking about that, like let's just start with, in your organization, what's the culture around feedback? Like, do they give a lot of feedback or not give a lot of feedback? You got to take that into consideration when you're thinking around how would 360s be used. If they're used to giving feedback, a 360 is something very comfortable and familiar. If they're not used to giving feedback and when you want to use a 360 as a lever to start to change that environment, then you have to have a little bit different approach. And then the HR team, are they prepared? You shouldn't really be debriefing a 360 if you've never done one yourself, just so you experience, the insecurities, the fears, but then you also experience, wow, this really helped change my awareness. I was able to change my behaviors. And this is something that I can trust people to be safe with me and productive. And then you have the design of the instrument. What questions are you using? Are they validated? Are they tested out? Are they actionable? Then we have that element where you talked about, is the employee committed? And then we have the preparation on are they prepared to provide feedback? Do they know how to provide feedback? Like sometimes we'll do a webinar with an organization if they're doing a bunch of 360s, and we'll go through and say, hey, this is how you provide feedback. This is what the system's going to look like. We also sometimes do webinars with participants and feedback providers on, this is what the report's going to look like. This is what the feedback's going to look like. Here's the timeline to make people comfortable with that. And then just that support system around once they get a 360 feedback, get their report. Is there going to be some internal resource debriefing them and external? Are they on their own? Just if you can kind of illustrate that whole ecosystem of support around this disruption, I think you've got a much higher chance that it'll be received successfully and positively.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think that preparation is critical, that it's not just doing the assessment to get the report and then you're done. It's a process. It really is. Look, we're investing in you. And it's important that they recognize we need you to invest in the process as well. Not everyone's going to choose to do that, but I think if we prepare in advance, it can be a much better experience.
And one more thought that you just reminded me of when you said that, I forgot about in the ecosystem, the preparation of the manager. Does the manager know how to support someone with a 360? A lot of times managers think that they need to look at someone's report and tell them what to do, but we recommend that a manager obviously participate in the 360. They know how to provide that feedback, and then they have that employee come back to them and say, hey, let's talk about your action plan. What are the 1 or 2 or 3 things that you want to work on? And they can support that. So yeah, it's all to create that support system around the disruption. There's also, so those are our principles, but then we have some thoughts. These are just some thoughts, some powerful thinking for your clients, either before, during, and after a 360. One is just be gentle with yourself. You're not perfect. Don't expect...
When we say, really fast, Dan, when we say client, we need the participant, right?
Yeah.
The participant who's receiving the 360. So if we have consultants on the phone, that might be there. If we have an HR person, this could be the person who's receiving the 360, right?
Yep, that's a great clarification. Yeah, and just to set some of the kind of in a mindset around this thing, like you're going to be getting this 360 feedback, is like you're not perfect, neither are your feedback providers. And I tell you something that's helpful is you don't need to eat this whole thing at once. It's almost like if you have a burrito in front of you, you don't need to eat it all in one bite. A lot of times people get a 360, they get a lot of feedback, and they think they need to eat, digest, assimilate, and fix all those things at once. And we end up telling them, no, you pick a piece, take a bite of that. You can kind of hold it in front of you and say, hey, here's the whole picture, but I am just going to focus on this one area for the next couple months. It's around communication. I think that lightens it up too. So take a little bit at a time. And then I've also heard a great analogy of like treat this feedback like trick-or-treaters. During trick-or-treating time, when a little trick-or-treater comes and knocks on your door, you don't, and if it's a little witch or a little clown, you don't invite them into the house and say, okay, now you can do whatever you want. You got free reign in my house. You actually, you see them, you acknowledge them, you're like, oh, that's a cute costume. You actually give them a little gift and then you send them on their way. And 360 feedback can be like that too. You don't need to take all of that in and say, now I have to do all of these things. You can take it, you want to acknowledge it, thank you for this feedback, I'm going to choose on this, and then you can send it on its way. And I think sometimes people feel like they can't do that, but it's just manageable. And then another mantra or practice or something to consider is when getting feedback is I can see why they might say this. It's not fact or fiction, but it's perception. And I'll seek to understand how I can use this to be a better effective leader. Now, it sounds kind of rote there, but those are some great words and some mindsets to keep in mind when you would have some feelings of anxiety or stress around it. It's just like, look, it's not fact or fiction. It's people's perceptions. And I'm willing to use this information, the bits and pieces, to help myself become a better leader. People find that helpful. And then just to be aware of the who said that temptation and trap. Whenever we get a 360, especially in those comments, so you can't see in the data who said what, but in the comments, you can read it and you'll be like, oh, I think I know who said that. And I'm like, that's totally normal. But it's not helpful. It doesn't really matter who said that. You need to acknowledge it and let it go. And what's more important is your purpose, what you want to achieve, than who said that. So those are just some things that I think are powerful thinking to involve and share with your clients.
So Dan, if you have a participant who is trying to run away from the feedback, it scares them. They kind of freeze up. They don't want to, one of the commenters said you can either fight, flight, or freeze. So when you talk to somebody and you talk through these, how do you help them through that process of saying, look, be gentle with yourself, right? Mm-hmm. You're not perfect, and that's okay. And this is part of that. How do you help them not run away from the process?
Well, I think it's a great comment around the fight or flight idea, and just think about, what do you do when you have a disruption? Are you going to fight? Are you going to flee? If you felt safe and comfortable in that disruption, and then if you felt like that disruption was for your benefit and you had that support, you probably would be less likely to flee or to resist that feedback. So I think that's probably the biggest answer that I would say on how do we do that and to address that. I also think we can bring our own fears and perceptions into these debriefs. Like, if we don't believe that the people around us are there to support us and build our capacity and capability, if we don't believe that, then we're probably not going to coach from that place. If we believe that the people that we work with aren't there to support us and build our capability and confidence, then we may impose that on our clients. I see that sometimes when we're kind of listening to other people debrief and we're practicing and training. You as a debriefer need to, and this is actually a great illustration of staying out of that box of your own fears, your own, experiences, and stay present with that person. But a lot of times we can kind of translate our fears onto that, because I find 360 to be a very positive experience for people, and I feel I can sense the anxiety up front, but as we go through this process and supportive process, it lessens incredibly. Great. So the other thoughts that we have, we just have a few steps for, hey, what would you do with your 360? And how would you work through this? And so I just wanted to talk through some of these. So what we do, and you can see, and this would be like the prep that I would give someone if we said, hey, you're going to have a 360 coming up. What I'd encourage them to do before they actually do the 360 is create that center for analysis. So I'd encourage them, take 5 minutes and write down, what do you want to accomplish over the next 6 to 12 months? Even before you did the 360, it's a really interesting place to start from there. Make that center so you can utilize that feedback. So I like to have people think about that. And then I also like to think about their support network. Who's going to help you maintain perspective and forward momentum through this 360 process? A lot of times, maybe they have 15 or 20 feedback providers, and how can you leverage those people to be supporters, to be part of your network of support, and even coaches? And so that actually helps alleviate some stress too, because if you feel like, I got this 360, I got to do this all on my own, that can be very overwhelming. But when you say, actually, I've got some people, I'm either going to have someone within HR, or I've got this external person that's going to debrief it with me. I have a former mentor who I'm actually will help. Maybe my manager, who said, hey, we'd like to invest this in you, is available to there and to help. And maybe you have some friends, So creating that network so you don't feel like you're alone actually helps reduce that stress. And then we usually tell them, hey, when you get your report, do that first high-level pass. What does it say? Read through the report once, notice what you feel, and then put it down. I'd encourage them to write down their early hypothesis and what they might want to work on, but then I would say leave it. Then, get it, look at your results. You've already identified what you want your center to be. You've identified the people that are available there to help. Go through your results. What's your initial hypothesis around what you might want to work on, the one or two things, and then let it go. Go do something else, go back to work, take a weekend, and then go through a second pass. Go through it a little bit deeper. Notice, make notes of your strengths, the lower scores. When we're doing our 360s, I really don't focus on much when we have a 7-point scale. If there's not a gap of 1.5 or 2, then I'm not that worried about it. But boy, when I see these places where I rate myself a 6, my manager rates me a 3, and I see that in a few places, that's some place that I'm probably going to want to follow up on. And so I'm identifying those gaps, and then any questions that come up around themes or trends that you see. Like you may see a trend. I'm rating myself higher on almost everything. I'm rating myself lower on almost everything. It looks like my peers are rating me higher than my direct reports, and just identify those themes. And then you've got your support network ready. You have that. If some type of debrief that you have, you create your plan for action. And then a big part of this that we strongly recommend as a best practice is thanking your feedback providers and sharing your plan. And this is something that we found you create that support network where you go to your feedback providers, and not just the people you don't know. You invited 15 people, 10 people provided feedback. We encourage you to respond to all 15 and say, thanks so much for completing that 360. I greatly appreciate your feedback. Here are the 1 or 2 things that I'm going to be working on. Here are the themes, and I'd really appreciate your support going forward. Boy, that's when you turn that set of feedback providers into a support network. And when people hear, wow, I filled out that 360, they actually read it, and they actually they're focused on some themes. They are that much more encouraging and that much more supportive of you to make those changes. And so that's one of the most powerful things we believe you can do to turn that 360 into new actions.
That's great. Dan, in conjunction with that, and step number 2, and one of the questions that we had come in is, should the participants reach out to the raters beforehand and set the stage? And I know we have email templates that we give out to people to be able to do that. Talk through the benefit of that participant reaching out to the raters beforehand and setting the stage.
Yeah, that's great. We have different levels of involvement in the pre-process. Some organizations say, hey, we're just going to take your org structure and that's who's going to provide feedback, meaning your manager, your peers, your direct reports. Other organizations say, and we're going to do that, and then I as your manager or the HR person are going to choose who provides feedback. We find that the most successful process in creating a safe environment is where the participant says, you know what, here's who I would like to get feedback from. And they're involved in that process, and then we facilitate a process where they select it and say, hey, here's who I want to get feedback, and then the manager can have some type of approval. But when there's that sense of ownership, that helps a lot. Like the worst case scenario is I do a 360, I go through the feedback providers, and I'm like, do you know these people? And they're like, actually, Dan, no, I don't work with these people enough. So we want to make sure that the people providing feedback are people that know them, trust them, have daily interaction with them, and so that's a big part of it, is that selection process. So if someone has selected those people, they've gotten the approval from their manager, that next step of inviting them and saying, hey, by the way, I'm participating in this 360. You may have gotten something from HR that says we're going to be doing this, but I would really appreciate your feedback. And if they want to even sweeten the deal more, to plant this seed that says, and after I get my feedback, I'm going to create a plan. I'm going to reach back out to you, and I'm going to share what that plan is, and I really look forward to your help. That, I think, again, expands that network of support around this disruption and creates a better chance to turn it into positive change.
Yeah. So, Dan, there are 2 ways that 360s are viewed. One is developmental, and one is performance. And we see them in both, right? Where some people use 360s for performance, while we discourage about using 360s for performance. They should be used more for developmental purposes. At least that's what we see. Confidentiality is something that is big, right? participants may or may not give feedback based on if they think that something's going to happen to them, if an executive leader might see the results. How do you set up that confidentiality hierarchy, if you will? And in that whole staging and creating the center and the network, how do you help people understand what confidentiality is like in that process?
That's a really important question, because a lot of times those questions may go unanswered. And it sounds strange that could be a possibility, but somebody could be doing a 360 and not know, is this just for me? What are my obligations after this? Do I have to share this with my manager or anyone? Is this going to be used for my performance? And boy, you want to talk about creating an unsafe environment, those unanswered questions, boy, that creates a lot of doubt and anxiety. So the more that you can answer those questions and be upfront, like we believe that, 360s are better for a developmental purpose, and that the person that the participant owns the data and they determine who sees it. But there are organizations that say, hey, actually, we're going to do it for a group of 7 people, and then those individual 360s are going to be shared with the leader of that group. And they're going to look at those and see if there are any trends that we can focus for developing strengths and opportunities within that team. We're fine with that as long as you tell people up front. As long as you tell them up front who's going to see this, your leader and the HR person. That's, that we believe that's okay. Ideally, it's just for them, but the main thing is like no surprises for around a 360. If they see, and I've been in those situations where you get someone on a 360, they're like, I haven't worked with this person in 6 months, but the name's on there. And that just, once you have that happen at the beginning of it, the trust and the confidence in the whole process really, really kind of diminishes from there. And when you're debriefing it, you're trying to kind of correct that from the beginning. So it all goes back to, that agency, that involvement, that ownership. The more personal ownership someone can have, the more understanding of how it's going to be used, the more comfortable they'll be, the more willing they'll be to invite people to participate. There's more support and structure around the whole process.
Yeah. And equally important for those who are providing feedback. So the raters, right? So those who are providing that feedback, they need to understand what confidentiality is like as well. And we recommend that those who will be providing the feedback have a good understanding of what the process is like, and that their results will not be called out. Their name is not attached to the result. And so that their scores will be aggregated with others in that group, so that they can honestly give their feedback. And again, that comes into that setting the stage. We use a lot here the phrase, we want to connect the dots. We want those who are providing feedback, the participants, we want everybody to understand what's going on in this process so there aren't any surprises, and that they understand the confidentiality, they understand how the reports are going to be distributed and what's going to be done with that information.
Yeah, and from a HR standpoint, we all think we know what 360s are and how they work, but I'd say with mine, probably more than 60, maybe 70% of the people that I work with, and they're senior people, have never had a 360 before. So it's out like in the HR vernacular of like, oh yeah, we use 360s. And actually, I don't think there's a very positive association with 360s. I think the bar is very low, meaning the idea of, oh, you get a 360, you figure out what your lowest scores are, and you try to improve it. So we actually, at DecisionWise, are trying to improve that perception around 360s, the value of it. But yeah, I think that's a big part of that process.
Great.
Well, with this, we're getting near the end, and you guys can type in your questions. It's probably the easiest way, but I would just ask.
Do you want to answer a couple other questions, Dan? Right
sure.
Now?
If
you want to jump to those?
Yeah.
There were some that I didn't get able to mix in with the content. So
that'd be great.
One was talking about internal consultants versus like using DecisionWise. So using an external versus an internal, and have you seen it go awry when they use internal consultants versus external consultants? And when might you use an external like DecisionWise versus an internal coach? And kind of talk through that.
Yeah, and that's a balancing act. That's a balancing act in the skill set. So probably the first thing I would go with is the people that are going to be debriefing. Are they trained? Do they know how to debrief? Well, have they done a 360? Have they had one done on them first? That's like the initial bar. Don't ever debrief a 360 if you never had one. And then are they trained? Do they know that process? If you've got some internal people that are either certified by us or somebody else, that can work really well, and they have the context. The challenge is around that confidentiality. Sometimes people are like, hey, you work here. And so there's a value of having that external resource. There's also, and in fact, I was amazed when I came here DecisionWise from an internal, places. Boy, when that saying of like, there's no prophet within their own land is, man, that is well, there's historical significance to that statement. But like, yeah, when you have someone that's not in the internal politics and the flow of your organization, it actually can help to have people feel comfortable in talking about things because they know you're not going to be bringing it back. And of course, for us, whether you're internal or external, the confidentiality that you have, this is just between you and I. I'm not going to be sharing any of this information. If your boss comes to me and asks for information, I'm going to direct him back to you. So it's around the skill set and that preserving that confidentiality. I think there's benefits to both.
Great. What about managers? We get a lot of people who say, I want to have a manager do the debrief. What would your perception be of having a manager do the debrief versus, say, an HR leader or an external consultant?
Yeah, boy, that relationship with your manager is a funky relationship. In the best of worlds, it can be someone that is all about your success and they want you to succeed. And they've got a lot of experience and capability. They're not intimidated by you. And all they want to do is help you succeed. Those people could be really good for a debrief. But that relationship with the manager, they're usually the one that controls your compensation, maybe your merit increase, your bonus. There's just a lot tied into that. And there may be some times where you're like, you know what, I've got some challenges or opportunities, but I don't need to be discussing those with my boss. So that manager doing the debrief to me is a little bit of a challenging situation. I can see why people would ask for it. And there are some managers that, again, do they have the capability to have that kind of debrief conversation? But that's a little bit too close to home for me in a lot of situations.
That's great. Dan, I want to talk a little bit shift around the performance portion again. So at DecisionWise, our 360s, we have 13 leadership competencies on them with a derailer section, right? What will derail somebody? It's really designed to create development, an opportunity for development. There are situations where a multi-rater view for performance is a great way to do a performance evaluation. A multi-rater performance evaluation is different than a 360 for development. And I just want to clarify at DecisionWise, we understand those differences, and our surveys, our assessments are different. If we're doing a 360 for development, it's under one structure. If it's being used as a multi-rater for performance, it's going to be done under a different structure. So
yeah, and it's kind of similar to like if you're doing an engagement survey, that's got a slightly different, it's got a different audience, it's got a different purpose, it's got a different structure and design. Same thing if you're doing a multi-rater for performance versus development. So yeah, I agree with that, and it's there are places where they can be used to help in performance situations. Those are unique, and there's just a lot more pressure on people of like, hey, you need to improve, and we're doing a 360 because of this. And when the raters know that, they're like, wow, I'm giving this feedback, and it might affect someone's job or their pay or their compensation. And that, to me, that diminishes the probability that they're going to be giving unbiased, unfiltered feedback. When they know it's just for development, just for the employee, they're more likely to give that. But yeah, different purposes, different designs and processes.
So we have a lot of good questions coming in, so I'm just going to keep going through some of these. So one question came around that they did a 360 process last year. And they did some of the things. They tried to get some communication out there. They tried to follow most of the things that we've been talking about, but it didn't go exactly as planned, right? It wasn't the best process, but they want to keep that will going and try it again. How would you recommend that they go into that next phase of the process to get this going again? Because you really have to build that culture of feedback. Yeah. So if it didn't go perfectly the first time, how do you get that going better the second time?
My first thought starts with, I probably connect. It sounds like this person knows, like, hey, things didn't go as well as we would like to, but I connect with the participants. I connect with the managers. I connect with the feedback providers. Maybe do some type of focus group or conversation with them and understand exactly where could we improve. And even that process in and of itself is going to help the process around the 360. Going, hey, we did this. We had some goals. We know it wasn't perfectly executed, but we're actually going back out to these people to find out exactly why, and we're going to make some adjustments. So that would be one. And then the biggest thing for like a 360 and the perception, is this useful or not, is the participants themselves. Like, did they make some changes? Were they willing to put in that effort and try to do that? And boy, if they felt that experience and that change, and they communicate that perception around 360 is going to change pretty quickly. So I would go back out and meet with people, do those focus groups, dial in and know exactly what can we do better, and then act on that.
Great. I'm going to take you back a few years, Dan. So when you were internal in corporate America and you were doing debriefs of 360s, how did you balance all of the responsibilities you had as an HR person internally with confidentiality? You were also perhaps you could see that things that are on their 360 might be impacting their performance. You kind of have a vision of all of this, and how did you maintain that confidentiality and balance that performance versus development and perhaps negative implications on both?
Yeah, that's a great question and can be a real challenge. And I'd refer back to some of these principles. Is when you're debriefing that 360, where is the answer? Is the answer in me as the HR person? And I've got the context. I know their boss and I know their team. I know what's going on. And if you're moving from that place and you're going, the answer's in me, boy, that's going to create a lot of problems for you. Because first of all, you don't know all those things. You kind of think you do. I think I do. I know what's going on. It's like, no, you don't. But if you move to that place of, I am going to facilitate this process to help this person find the answers within their report, and we're going to move off of what they want to achieve, that helps tremendously. That stops you from going into, your little bag of tricks of experience and relationships and history and staying. I mean, I don't know if this is the right analogy, but it's like you stay like Switzerland. You are like, I am not passing judgment on this. I am not bringing my baggage to this conversation. When I'm internal and I'm meeting with you, this is just between you and I am going to stay current and present with you. That's a real challenge, but that's what you have to do. Even now, like, I have a situation where I'm coaching an executive team, and there's 7 people on the team, and they know I'm coaching each one of them and coaching the team, and I cannot use any of the information from one conversation in another. Each conversation has to be pure and clean, and with practice and that just focus that you are not going to violate confidentiality in any way, shape, or form is the path that you have to pursue.
Great. Dan, thank you so much. I know we have others that we didn't get to, but really appreciate what you've provided to us today. We're almost up against it time-wise, so let me just say a couple of quick things. One, we've had lots of requests for the slide deck. I'll work with you to make sure that anything that we can't send out, and then we'll try to send that out in an email with this so that you'll get that information with the slide deck. So please know that will be coming. We'll send out an email with that information. Also for the SHRM and HRCI credit codes, we'll be sending that out as well. So please watch for that email. It might be tomorrow before that comes out, but please know that we'll get that information out to you. Additionally, we want to just again invite you to participate in the DecisionWise coaching certification training. That will be March 26th and 27th in our offices here in Salt Lake City, and we're excited to have you come to that if you would like to. There's information on our website about that information, and so love to have you come. That will also be included in the email that we send out. But Dan, thank you again for helping us today and giving us all this great information. And we thank. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Just if anybody's got any questions about any of these thoughts and you want to chat, just feel free to reach out to me. My contact's in the deck and in this information, and I'd love to chat with you more about it. So thank you so much for your participation and for your interest in this topic and for raising the bar in 360s and coaching.
Great. And thank you everyone for joining us today. If you didn't get to watch the whole thing, it will be on demand. You'll be able to watch it back on this Bright Talk channel and watch for our other webinars coming up throughout the year.